Hi, welcome to the Process Director Training Webinar. I'm Dale Franks, and today we are going to talk about knowledge views. What we are not going to do is talk about all of the possible properties and what's on each tab of the knowledge view definition. If you want a comprehensive look at that, we have documentation on knowledge view definitions that goes through every property that you can possibly see and tells you what that property is. That's not to say we're not going to look at some of these properties. We are. In fact, we're going to have to, because we're going to cover some different scenarios for setting up a knowledge view to do different things. And we're also going to talk about some best practices, which will inevitably cause us to talk about some of the properties and what you should be setting whenever you're configuring a knowledge view, because there are some things that are a little bit tricky here and there. And you have to know where these little tiny pitfalls might be. So we are going to talk about those particular scenarios. So with all of that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at some knowledge views, and we will go from the simple to the more progressively complex as we continue over the next 2 hours. Let's start off with just the normal basic knowledge view that you would generally create in Process Director. Our most important tab is the Properties tab in terms of what information we're going to bring back. As you probably know, a knowledge view will return everything on the system. The second that you create a knowledge view, it works. For example, if I just go here and I go create new, and if I can figure out where K is in the alphabet, I can find knowledge view, and we'll type webinar as the name and we'll hit OK. Guess what? I have a perfectly valid and perfectly working knowledge view. If I update and run it without doing anything else, what it is going to want to do is to return every form instance, every process timeline instance, and every workflow instance, because apparently I do have one or two on this system. Here's one right here. It's going to return them all to me. Obviously, that is going to be more than 100 items. The default number of records and knowledge view returns is 100 items. I obviously have hundreds and hundreds of forms and form instances on this system. So when I create a new knowledge view and it wants to return everything, it's going to be too big to return anything in any sort of logical system. So what happens when you run a knowledge view is that the knowledge view is going to return records in the order in which they are found in the system when it returns them. So for example, if we look down here at all these forms that are called data form, well, I have 1,000 of these forms. It's not returning all of them. In fact, it's only returning a small subset of them. And I've got all of these other forms and indeed a workflow instance right here. And then I have all of these other forms down here. Is that a form too? Yes, that is a form instance too. So everything is all kind of mixed up here. And again, this just illustrates that what it's doing is it's returning the records in whatever order it retrieves them in the database. And because by default, a knowledge view will only return 100 records, it's obviously going to reach the max number of results. So once it achieves the goal of grabbing 100 records, it's going to stop looking. And once it stops looking, it is then going to do the sorting, which is another thing you need to keep in mind. By default, A knowledge view always sorts on the first column. Usually that's the name columm, that's the default column. And most often that is the one default column that we never change, that we always keep. Oh, occasionally we'll have to do something a little different, a little tricksy, but for the most part, we always keep this name column. And by default, this column is always sorted. Sorting does not happen during the search. It's going to just look in the database. It's going to find the first 100 records and it's going to return them. Only after those records have been returned and are ready for display in the client does the sorting occur. The sorting in a knowledge view occurs locally. When you create a business value and you put in an order by clause, let's say you have a SQL business value and you throw an order by clause on the SQL in the SQL statement. The database is ordered on the database side. All the records that are returned are ordered inside the database before you even see them. So the database returns them to you in the order in which you expect. That does not happen on a knowledge view. If it did, then basically our very first knowledge views would all start with A, and I'm sure that I have a lot more forms that start with A somewhere on my system, but it's not returning them in that way. It's only finding one advanced forms 2 form. I'm pretty sure there's more than one instance of this form, just as I'm sure that if we look at this data form, I have way more than the 30 or 40, however many it is here. I know that I have 1,000 of these records, and I'm certainly not seeing that. So the ordering happens on the client, something that you have to remember whenever we think about what records are going to be pulled back. It's not going to do all the sorting and pull the records back in some sorted order from the database. This sorting is not going to happen until after the records are returned, and sorting happens in the client, not on the database side. So that means that the records have already been returned to you before the sort occurs. So that's just something to keep in mind. But again, I didn't make any changes to this knowledge view. I literally created the knowledge view definition, and now it wants to return all of the default items, which are forms, timeline instances, and knowledge or workflow instances that exist on the system, and it's just going to want to return them all. So knowledge views always want to work, and they always want to return everything on the system. So our job when we create a knowledge view, of course, is to restrict the records that occur or that are returned so that we only see the appropriate number of records. By the way, it is no mistake that by default, a knowledge view returns 100 items and no more. You don't want a knowledge view to return 100 items. I will just say that as a general rule of thumb. And if you have knowledge views that are returning by default more than 100 items, except in special circumstances for a administrative knowledge view that you will run only occasionally, you do not want to change this. You do not want to return more than 100 records for knowledge views that are accessed by end users. You want to filter knowledge views down to, at the very least, the largest usable record set. And for the average user, the largest usable record set is 100 items. Any more than that, and it just becomes really hard to look through this list. And again, this is only 100 items. There's a lot of stuff here that I would have to search through to find what I want. If you have a knowledge view that might potentially return thousands of items, so let's say you have a process that routinely runs on your system, some sort of routine approval process that everybody in the organization uses, there might be thousands of instances of that knowledge view. Your best bet is when you create that knowledge view to initially filter it so that it doesn't return more than 100 items. If somebody needs to search for something, there's a variety of search filters that you can apply to the knowledge view, but what you should never do is have a knowledge view that is accessible by all users, or basically any end users, that returns hundreds and hundreds or even thousands of rows. We have a customer currently who have, I don't know, every knowledge view so far that I've seen on their system returns a max of 1,000 or 2,000 rows, and they routinely return the full 1,000 or 2,000 rows. And a couple of them are on the home page workspace for everybody in the system. So they have thousands of users, all of whom log into Process Director, and all of whom immediately run a knowledge view that is returning 2,000 rows. And they have begun complaining about system slowness. Well, knowledge views are expensive to run in terms of system resources. They're convenient for you as a user because I don't have to write any code to make a knowledge view work. I just go through my little properties tabs. I change the properties I want. I specify the columns that I want to return, and Process Director just does this on the fly. It's real simple on this side. On the side that you don't see, inside Process Director, while it is creating the very complex SQL statement that is required to return basically anything in the system, that's a complex SQL query that takes the system a long time to chop through. That is the payment that we make for having a knowledge view interface that allows me just to pick anything that I want that exists anywhere inside the Process Director system and return it in a knowledge view. It's convenient on the front end. On the back end where the work occurs, it is very expensive in terms of system resources. So if you're returning thousands of rows in a knowledge view that is routinely run by thousands of people, yeah, you're going to see system performance issues. We've documented it. We tell you this in the documentation, and yet people still do it, and they return these huge knowledge views. You don't want to do that for a normal knowledge view. So whenever you're configuring this thing, this maximum number of rows to return as, more than 100, you want to keep that, as is, so that you don't return a whole bunch of rows. There may be rare situations where you might want to return more than that, but from a user perspective, realistically, returning more than 100 rows is just a big burden on your end users because they tend to be looking for specific information. And so returning 100 or more rows is not generally helpful from the user's perspective, and thus, in most cases, is not a good user experience or UX choice to make as a designer. So to get back to this tab, because our job with a knowledge view is to return as little data as possible, this becomes a very important tab. Most of the time, the only thing you need to fill out on this tab is your forms associated with knowledge view. In most cases, what you are returning in a knowledge view, especially a knowledge view that is designed for end user viewing, most of the time you're returning form instances. And most of the time, there's an exception we'll talk about in a minute, but most of the time, you only want to return those form instances because the form instance is the primary object by which the user interfaces with Process Director. The whole point of having a workspace for the user is so that they can open the forms that they normally submit, and all of the interaction that goes on between the system and the end user is done through the form. Thus, most of the time that we return a knowledge view, we want to return the form instance so that the user can open it up and either review it or make changes to it or whatever it is that they need to do. So for the most part, this is the only thing that you need to set, is forms associated with knowledge view. This is true even if you want to return information about the timeline. I commonly see when I go onto um, customer sites, uh, this, where they're returning form instances, but for some reason they think that they need to set both the form and the timeline associated with the knowledge view. Let me disabuse you of that notion. You don't have to do it that way. There's no reason for doing both. If you're returning form instances, in most cases, with the exception that we'll talk about right here with multiple forms in one process, in most cases, you only want to return the form instance. And if you, even in the form itself, even if, or not in the form, but in the knowledge view itself, even if you have a column that returns timeline information, you don't need to associate the knowledge view with the timeline. The form instance is already associated with the timeline. Probably the form definition is too. So in fact, the form instance is itself an attachment to the process timeline instance. So when you pull the form instance, you are in effect also pulling the process timeline instance as well. So there's generally no reason to do anything other than return the form itself, and then you can pull timeline instance things as well in the knowledge view because that association already exists. So you only have to set up the form, except for this other use case of multiple forms in one process. We'll talk about that in a second. The one thing that you can do now in a knowledge view that you were not able to do before is to do in-place editing in the knowledge view. In fact, I got this thing running. Let's just update and run it and watch it work. So I have three columns here, input 1, input 2, and input 3, each of which are set to be editable. Now, the only reason I can edit these input 1, input 2, and input 3 columns is because they are form fields on the form instance I am returning. So these are three input fields. So if I want to make a change, then I can go in and change input 1 to owl, and I can change input 2. By the way, we might as well open the form instance associated with this. Now I just changed input 1 from ABC to owl. And if I open the form, I can see that this is indeed owl. And I can do the same thing here. I can change that to gecko, and I can change this to lion. And there, I've changed it there. Here is my form. I have not refreshed my form. I suppose I should do that. And there we go. You can see that the change has been made on the form. This in-place editing only works for form field columns. So if we go back and look at our knowledge view and we go to the columns tab, these three columns, input 1, input 2, and input 3, and those are in fact the names of the field on the form. There's this checkbox, it's optional, to allow in-place edit. That only works for form fields. So if I'm returning form instances and I want to have form fields as the column, I can edit them in place automatically inside the knowledge view. This is super useful if you are an administrator. It is also super dangerous if you expose this to end users, because you will allow end users basically to edit everything, at least to which they have permission to edit. So you have to be cautious when using it. For that reason, you don't want to have end users edit stuff you don't want them to edit. Although as an administrator, it's extraordinarily useful to have this as a tool. There's a wrinkle, however. This doesn't just work automatically. If we go back to the Options tab, there are a couple of things that have to be checked. Now, most of the time, the only thing that I have checked on a knowledge view that I want to display to end users is the object I'm returning. So I'm only returning form instances. In most cases, that is all you want to return. You generally don't want to allow additional actions on objects or give them the action icons, or certainly not, give them permission to create new objects. So largely all of the stuff is unchecked except for form instances. But if you're going to use in-place editing, you have to ensure that the properties checkbox is checked on allow these actions on objects. And where it says display action icons for children, that has to be checked too. If these two properties are not checked, the in-place edit doesn't work. In fact, I forget which one it is, but you could have one of these unchecked and it looks like it works, but it doesn't work. So you have to have these two things checked for the in-place edit. So anytime that you're going to do that, you're going to check on one of these allow in-place edit checkboxes. That's great. That's fine. Just be sure that you come back and check to be sure that properties and children are also checked. That's just required to make the in-place editing work. The filter tab, because we don't want to return more than 100 records, the filter tab becomes super important to ensure that our default view doesn't return more than 100 records. Now, in this case, it's unnecessary because, well, I am not going to submit 100 instances of this normal form. I've only submitted enough to give me some data in a knowledge view that I can play with. So it's never going to return more than however many records it's returning now, 8 or 10 or so, whatever it is. But in most cases, I am going to want to add a condition that limits the number of records that get returned. Whether you want to expose that filter to end users is up to you. Obviously, there are some things that you are going to want end users to be able to change. For example, if I am trying to limit records by, let's just go to form and let's go to form submit date, right? So I say, okay, I'm only going to limit this to a form submit date that is greater than, we'll say 30 days ago. And that's another tricksy thing that we'll have to talk about. So I only want to show stuff from the last 30 days. Okay, cool. That's fine. We can do that. However, if I'm an end user and I need to find something older than that, this will be a little too limiting. So what I'm probably going to want to do is check the prompt user when run. What that will do is show them the prompt at the top of the knowledge view when it runs. So if I run this knowledge view now, it's not going to show me anything because I am looking for something that was submitted after 4/27/2026. So that's not great because I now have to, as a user, expand that search range. I don't know how far I have to expand it, but let's expand it back to 2017. And we'll say April 1st, 2017. Now I can hit search, and now I get my 6 records back the way that I'm supposed to have them. Again, for This particular form instance, that works fine because these are the only 6 instances that exist. But if I'm going to do my initial filtering for end users by date, I almost have to ensure that the user can do that search and can change the default search criteria. That means that if the form submit date is, as it is in this case, my primary means for ensuring that I pull less than 100 records, this is going to rapidly get out of hand if I go back as a user and say, okay, well, show me everything since 2017. Well, that might be thousands and thousands of forms that are going to be returned by making that change. At the end user level. It doesn't bother me here because it only returns 6 records. In the real world, it might return thousands. So that is one of the concerns with the filter whenever it comes down to trying to figure out how to filter to that 100 record window. That kind of gets, a little tricky. What would ideally be best, and again, it's not a perfect solution, would be to find, and I'm sorry, I can't give you any advice on what this might be, but the ideal thing would be to find some filter that matches the 100 record maximum, but that you don't have to prompt the user about. Because if I don't prompt the user about it, there is not a prompt at the top of the knowledge view that the user can mess with to make a change to that initial filter. So some ways of doing that filtering in a normal knowledge view might be, let's actually go down here to this webinar one. So as we saw when we ran this earlier, it's going to return my max of 100 rows. Okay, I want to get my filter down to 100 rows or less. So one of the things that I might do is make an active requests knowledge view, which is to say, I would go into the knowledge view, and in this case, I'm going to add a condition, and the condition I'm going to pull here is timeline and timeline status, and I want my timeline status to be active. I think I have an active timeline on this system. I may not. Let's go ahead and check that so that we can see the filter when I run the knowledge view. And we'll go ahead and we'll hit update and run. Okay, great. I do have some active timelines running on my system. So some stuff from last week and some stuff that's still hanging out here from a webinar we did in February, apparently. So great. This is also pulling 6 records. Cool. It is pulling 1, 2, 3, 4 timelines and 1, 2 forms. So this timeline and this form go together. This timeline and this form go together. These 2 timelines don't have a form associated with them, so it's just returning the timelines. So cool. That is a great limiter. So having an active timelines view where it only pulls the active timeline is a great way of filtering out all of those timelines. And of course, if I switch this to any value or complete and search, it's going to give me, once again, my hundreds and hundreds of records that I have in the system, which I don't necessarily want it to do. So what I'm probably going to want to do if I create a filter to pull back only the active records, then what I probably want to do is uncheck that prompt user when run. By the way, something we didn't do on this process timeline, when we talk about limiting whatever the timeline wants to return, most of the time, as I said earlier, we only want form instances. By default, it's going to want to return form, workflow, timeline, or case instances. 3 of these things you do not want it to return. So you would simply turn them off. Then we hit update and run, and it will return only 2 records to me because I only have 2 forms that are associated with process timelines that are active. By the way, this is also another demonstration of why you don't need to pick both a form and a process timeline whenever you are configuring the properties tab. Now, in this case, I'm not specifying a particular form, and that is intentional simply because if I did specify a specific form, I would have to find it and where it exists in the content list because I'm not entirely sure. But note, I've said return only form instances, but my filter is a timeline filter. Once again, a demonstration that the form and the timeline are inextricably linked. And so if I'm returning form instances, I can still filter on timeline properties as I've done in this case because the linkage already exists. I don't have to intentionally link both of those things in the properties tab to be able to freely select either as columns or as filters timeline attributes if I'm just returning form instances. As you can see here, it's just returning the 2 form instances that we saw earlier. None of the 4 timelines are being returned because I have once again limited what my knowledge view returns. The reason that we do this association here is that in most cases, we only want to return, well, we want to return form instances, but we only want to return form instances from a specific form definition. We don't want to see, the definitions or the form instances from 3 or 4 different processes. We only want to see it from one process. So what I would do here is I would look for this form. What is this form that is being returned? Custom task form submitted on 5/14. So that's the custom task form. So I'm going to assume if I go back here and I wanted to change this, it would be somewhere in archive and it would be in custom tasks. I'm going to say custom tasks up. Nope, not custom task updated. How about CT basics? Nope. All right, I'm not entirely sure what that form is from because what I wanted to do is grab form custom. No, it's not there. Form custom task. Is it on 6? Manipulate array data. Array form. Nope. Those don't have the right names. Well, I guess I'm not going to be able to do that association because I don't know where that form definition exists. So I'm not going to be able to associate that form. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to demonstrate it there. So let's go into my base objects and let us open up a new instance of the normal form and run it. And we'll just throw in some gibberish there and I will submit this form. All right, great. I am now inside the running process timeline instance. So let's go back here to my webinar form and let's just go ahead and point it at our KV normal form. And let's update and run this. And I should get, and in fact do get, a single record. So this is my normal form 668. And if we open it up, we can see that's the gibberish that I put into it earlier, but it's only returning one form because I have a knowledge view filter that only looks for active timelines. So again, even though I'm associating this with the form, I have no problem either setting the status here or indeed going into the columns, and let's just add a new column here and we'll call it activity, and we will just go to timeline activity, running activity name, and we'll run our knowledge view again, and we are in activity 1 of the process timeline instance. So again, I can return and filter by any timeline activity stuff I want, even though I do not have a direct association with the timeline. Don't need it. Well, normally I don't need it. There's a catch. So here is a little different situation. So I have a knowledge view here and 2 forms. I have my original form and I have my secondary form. And in the process timeline itself, and I forget exactly how I configured this. So I'm pretty sure. Well, how did I configure it? I may have done something more simple. Let me look at my form. I have my original form, and this form starts the knowledge view. Then I have a secondary form, and that does not start the knowledge view. So I have my 2 forms. 2 forms original. What? Now I've forgotten how I configured this to run both forms. But I know that I have multiple instances. Let me look at the form itself. Sorry about this. I was a little arrogant, I think, in my prep yesterday, trying to figure out what I was going to do here. So that is the original form. And let's take a look at this. That's not an event field. I am not entirely sure how I configured this or whether I have broken it. That's also possible. Let me run my knowledge view, however. So I do have my 2 forms here. Here's my original. Here is my secondary form. Again, here's an original secondary form, original, second. So I have 2 different forms. Also notice I have 2 different columns here showing fields from form 1, form 2, and both forms, which we'll all discuss here in a second. So however I have done it, and it's not immediately obvious to me how I did it, what I was expecting was a swap between form 1 and form 2. That's what I did. So on activity 2, I have set use form for activity. So normally what I would do, but apparently I was a little lazy. Normally what I would do is I would throw in a form actions activity, and I would set form 2 as the default form for the activity. I didn't do that in this case. So pro tip, if I just want to use a form in a specific activity, I can do that. I can just say on the advanced options tab for a user activity, I can say, all right, use a different form. So that's what I've done. On the second activity, it uses the secondary form. And that way, every time I run this, I have two different forms that run in this activity. And that's perfectly fine. And I would not recommend that you do it this way, although clearly it is possible, and that is how I lazily did it. Generally, what I'd recommend is making it obvious for reasons that I have just demonstrated that I am switching forms. And so between activity 1 and activity 2, it might be a wise idea to drop in a form actions activity to change the default form for the timeline, because that way somebody who comes and looks at your timeline later, or you coming back and looking at your own timeline later, will find it much easier to figure out what is going on, and how they configured it in the first place, rather than hiding the form switch way down here at the very bottom of the advanced options tag for one of the activities. This, by the way, is one of the reasons why I always drop in the custom task activity to set the form data for a form request number, because we always have a unique form request number. That's why I always create it as a custom task timeline activity that I generally call set request number. That way, when I look at my timeline, I can just look at it and see, that is a custom task activity. And then I can open the custom task and I can see, well, I'll know from the name set request number exactly what that activity does. So there's no question. I don't have to do it that way. Just as I was able to go on the advanced tab and just swap the form out on the fly, I can just in the set form data section, I can just set form data right here from the set form data section. And I don't actually need that custom task activity to do a set form data. It is built into the timeline definition. But I do find if I come back to the timeline more than a year later, because it's been well over a year since I've looked at any of these in detail, or since I created them. When I come back and look at it, having it stuck up here in set form data is not going to be obvious to me. Just as the change that I made in activity 2 wasn't obvious to me. So help yourself out. Make things more obvious than I did. And this is a perfect demonstration of why you need to make things obvious. Because even though I created this, I have no idea what I did. I now had to go back in and live on TV had to find out how I actually created these two forms. Digression over. Let's look at our knowledge view. We're going to do something a little bit different on the Properties tab for this knowledge view. Proceed, please. Because we are not going to set forms associated with knowledge view. And the reason we're not going to do that is because now we can't limit our return to a single form, because we're using multiple forms, 2 in this case, in our process timeline. So just as I can pull timeline information by having a form associated with knowledge view, I can pull form information by setting timelines associated with knowledge view. Remember, the form is an attachment of the process timeline instance. So if I have multiple forms with that time, or multiple form instances associated with that timeline instance, I can't simply return the forms associated with, because that's only going to allow me to choose one of the 2 forms that I need to see in my knowledge view. Okay, easy fix for that. I just choose timelines associated with knowledge view. Now it's only going to return objects that are associated with this particular timeline. Since there are 2 forms associated with it, it will return both of my forms. Now, this is a little tricky. I have form 1 field and form 2 field here. As it happens, both of these form fields, I believe, are called input 1 on each of the forms. What I would most likely want to do is have all of the values in the same column in my knowledge view. Because in Process Director world, those two controls, even though they have the same name, input 1, have two different IDs. Now, if you remember last week, what we talked about with knowledge views is that they're kind of lying to you. Like the name that you see in this column, yeah, that's Process Director being nice and showing you the name. The actual value in this column is the GUID that uniquely identifies each one of these form instances. So the actual data in the column is not what you're seeing. Similarly, each form field has its own unique ID. And while it is in fact showing you the value of that form field, they're not the same form field, even though they have the same name. They're on two different forms. Therefore, they have two different control IDs and are different GUIDs. So I can never return them in the same column if what I try to do in my columns tab is say, okay, well, we'll pull input 1 and form 2 field input 1. They both have the same name, but if I try to do it through the UI like this, they are not the same control. And so therefore, I can't concatenate them by going to the choose system variable dialog box, right? And picking, whatever form, picking two different form fields. I'm just not allowed to do that. I can only pick one form field. And so I can pick one from each form, and they each go in a different column. But keep in mind, all of this stuff, whenever we're building these columns, please note that the name of this dialog box is Choose System Variable. Every column data value is a system variable. Now, we've kind of made it easy because we've put all the system variables in these cool little menus where I can just pick something and click it off of a menu and magic happens. But it's not really magic. You're just choosing a system variable. And nothing says you have to choose a system variable. You can, in fact, just type a system variable by setting the value to string. And then you can just put in a system variable. In our case, I have two forms, both of which have a field named input 1. Now, unlike the knowledge views, the default way that it constructs a field, when I pick input 1, what I'm actually telling it is I'm creating a rather complex system variable here. And we can see what the complexity is on the system variable here. I need to choose a form definition and a form field. So in this case, it would be K. What is the form? KV2Forms original. So my form definition would be KV2Forms original. And obviously this is not a long enough box for me to pick that. So I'm not entirely sure how I got that. K. Well, this is weird. It's only giving me down to A. I've got a long way to go to K, and it's not showing it to me on my form definition. So not sure what's happening there, although clearly I was able to do it beforehand because I was able to pick those two input fields. But This is basically a combination of the form definition and the form field that is pulling this value. And it's looking through the GUIDs to pull that data back. So what you're basically doing when you're picking something out of the choose system variable dialog box is you're actually picking the GUID of the object that you're wanting to return, whatever it might be, whatever property it is. And that's great, except I have two fields named input1 and I want to concatenate them. So that's relatively easy to do because this method doesn't care about GUIDs. What it's going to do here is text matching. So whenever the form instance is returned, it's going to go to the both forms column and it's going to say, oh, you're looking for a form field named input1. Well, because in both forms, I have an input1 field, this will find the appropriate form field in either form because unlike the choose system variable dialog box, where it is actually picking specific objects, this system variable, the form field system variable, is now just doing name matching for the form field name. And so therefore, since I have input1 on both forms, I can concatenate those values into a single column. Now, what I cannot do if I do that is edit the columns in place edit, right? So because I am picking a specific column, and actually I can't really even do it here. It's all grayed out. So I really can't even do the allow in place edit. Although maybe that's because I just don't have properties and children selected here. Let's see if I select that, if it will update it for me and go back to my columns tab. And no, they're still grayed out. I'm pulling multiple fields or I'm pulling multiple forms. And so my allow in place edit is not going to work. However, if I was pulling from a single form, I can still do this. I can still use the system variable name to pull the field value back. I mean, this does work in a knowledge view that only returns a single form instance of a single specified form definition. But even if I had that set up here, what it would allow me to do is to edit these two fields to allow in place edit. But it will never allow in place edit on this column here, where I'm just using the system variable name, because it is not a direct link to a form field. So it doesn't know what the form field or the form control ID is, so it doesn't know how to find it in the database. So I can't edit it directly the way that I could if it was just a regular form field. Now, in this case, it doesn't matter because I am returning two forms. I can't do in-place edit anyway. That's just a limitation on the system. In-place edit will only work if I'm returning a single defined form instance rather than the two that I'm returning here. But if it was a normal knowledge view, I still wouldn't be able to have this system variable field allowed for in-place edit because I'm using a system variable here. Right now, during the design phase, Process Director doesn't know what that system variable is. It's not evaluating it yet. So as far as Process Director is concerned, this is not a form field. Now, it may very well be a form field, and you and I understand it to be, but Process Director doesn't. It won't really know what this is until the knowledge view runs, and it evaluates that system variable. Only at that time will it recognize it as a form field. But of course, now it's too late because I can't set it up for in-place editing. So the main thing to remember with a process that uses two different forms is A, just pull the process, ignore the forms associated with, which is the exact opposite of what you usually do. Set a form associated with and ignore the timelines. because you only need one of these. You don't need both of those set. So depending on what it is you're trying to do, if I have one single form instance that I'm returning, great, then just return the form instance. If I have multiple form instances associated with a single process, then fine, return the process. Either way, you only have to choose one of these items here. And the other thing to remember is if I am going to have multiple forms, the only way to really concatenate them into a single column is if they do in fact have the same name, the same form field name across all of the forms. If they do, then I can concatenate them across columns. If they don't, then there's really nothing much I can do other than have separate columns for each form. And that's just something that you have to live with as kind of a limitation of knowledge use whenever I'm returning multiple forms like that. Now let's talk about arrays. So arrays can be a little tricky. So let's run this arrays knowledge view. This knowledge view returns stuff weird. And the reason it returns it weird is because of how Process Director deals with arrays. When you have a form with an array, you almost always have some fields that are inside the array, but there are always some fields that are not part of the array. So Process Director has to try to figure out how to bring that information into Process Director. So what it does is for each row in the array, the knowledge view will return a separate row for each row in the array. So here is my webinar array form 135. So there's form 135. And this has an index of 1, an index of 2, and an index of 3. The reason it does is because there is an array on the form, and there are 3 rows in that array. Here they are. There's also another form field that exists outside of the array. Process Director, whenever it comes across an array like this, is going to say, all right, if I've got to build a knowledge view, then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to build one record returned for each row in the knowledge view. So here is array field 1, 2, and 3 for the first row, A, B, and C, D, E, and F, G, H, and I get returned. So I'm going to get these 3 rows. Now notice for my non-array field, which has the value letters group, it's going to show up in each one of these 3 rows. So let's run this knowledge view. Now we see something a little bit different. This is my other choice for working with arrays. These are the 2 choices that you have available to you. Arrays, by default, return a comma-separated list of values. Now, we separate these out into different fields in the form and also in the knowledge view that we just looked at so that they can show up as separate columns. Now, the trouble is because this one form has 3 separate rows, all of which have the 3 same form fields, I generally have to split the return of this single form instance 135, and I have to split it up into 3 rows in the knowledge view. Except, just as we saw earlier when I used the form field name to concatenate a single row across multiple forms, I can do the same thing here to concatenate multiple array rows across a single row in a knowledge view. I simply have to concatenate the names by using the system variable for the form field names. Now, trouble with doing that is, while I can do it, what it is going to return is the actual comma-separated list that exists in the form. So I've got input 2, 3, and 4, and it's returning this comma separated list for each. But because it's not in a tabular format, we have to do some extra thinking because I've got A as my first column, and then in input 3 on the second row, I've got B, and then on the third row, I've got C. So it's difficult to see what the relationship is between each of these three different fields because I'm just returning them as values. They're not tabular. And so it just makes it a little bit harder to read. But it's easy to configure because if I go to the columns tab, once again, I can simply use input 2, input 3, and input 4 as the field names, and it will just concatenate those three fields with no problem, and it will show them all in the same row. So what this enables me to do, if I concatenate it that way, is to pull back one row for each form instance, but it is going to concatenate all of the values in each input control with their values. And by the way, I did it wrong. The first column would be input 2, AAA, DDD, GGG, BBB, EEE, but still I'd have to know the position. So this is my first item. This is row 1. DDD is row 2. GGG is row 3. I have to kind of do all that math in my head to figure out which of these values in each of these fields belong to each other. It is, in fact, much easier for me to see that relationship if I just go ahead and return the same row for each row in the array, and I just pull 3 rows for my knowledge view. Now, I should point out, I'm including the array fields here. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this one. And I'm just going to copy it here. And I have array fields copy. And I'm going to change this to don't use array fields. And I'm going to come back over here to the columns tab. And I am going to just delete array field 1, array field 2, and array field 3. So same knowledge view, all I've done is delete the array fields. And now when it runs, it's only showing me one row for each form instance. It's only going to show me the multiple rows if I use the array rows or the array fields as a column of the knowledge view. So in this case, I've just eliminated the array fields. And so therefore the only field left is the one non-array field I have. It doesn't care then about what all the rows are in the array. It's not returning the data. So therefore it just ignores it. And once again, it returns a single row in the knowledge view. So if you don't like the multiple rows, then you can get away with getting rid of those array fields and just pulling out your non-array fields. And you'll only have one row per. And then I guess if you want to do anything with the array fields, you would just have to open up the original form instance and make your changes there. One other thing to note, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete this on the fly while we're here. And we'll go back to our array fields. Oh, I wanted to run it. So notice, this is not in the version 6 UI, so I hate it. But notice I have the ability to change my values in either the non-array or the array fields. And the only reason that I can do this, and let's just open our form just to see that I did in fact change the value. The only reason that I can do this is because I am using each of the array fields as a column. This will work fine in Process Director. I didn't set these two columns as editable. I don't know why. I certainly could have. I just didn't. But I can edit both my array and non-array fields, and it works fine. And the reason that it works fine, well, there we go. Finally, I was just clicking like a maniac trying to get that thing to go into edit mode. The reason why it works fine is, again, back to these index numbers, because these index numbers match the array row numbers in your array. So if I decide that I do want to edit this field, then great, it'll do that because it knows that I want to edit array field 1, or actually the name of the field is input 2. So it knows that I want to edit input 2 on row 2 of my array. And so all the information that it needs to do the editing is all right there. So I'm perfectly happy whenever I am pulling back array fields, as long as I am pulling them back as fields, and as long as I don't mind having the multiple rows returned, then it's perfectly okay if I go in and I edit in place in the knowledge view itself. Conversely, again, I cannot do that in this knowledge view where I have used the text system variable just to manually concatenate these rows, because it doesn't know that they're form fields. So the only field that I could in place edit in this knowledge view with this configuration would be my one non-array field. So there are practical implications for how arrays work, and depending on what you want to do and what you want to show your users, you have to think very carefully about how your knowledge view is going to display arrays. As we talked about earlier, in general, if you are going to be doing in-place edit, except in limited circumstances, you probably don't want to allow your end users to do that. But as an administrator, in-place edit is super useful. And if you're an administrator, pulling up a form instance that uses array fields and seeing that, this form instance has 3 rows and these 2 form instances have 2 rows, that should not frighten or confuse you. You should just know that that's how arrays work. When you are showing end users a knowledge view, you do need to think pretty carefully about whether you want to show it to them this way, whether you want to just remove all of the array fields so that the knowledge view itself only returns the non-array fields and thus only shows 1 row per form instance. Or maybe, which I'm not sure is optimal, maybe you don't mind showing your end users this, where they get 1 row per form instance and they get to see the data in the array. I'm not sure what the best choice is. I would not show the array rows if I didn't have to. And now we're talking about my personal preference. And I would probably want to discuss this with users to figure out what they would want to see better. So would it be better just not to use the array rows? And if they wanted to edit anything in the array, they would just have to open the form? maybe, but what if the data in the array is super important and they do want to see it? Then would I rather show it to them this way or with a different row for each row in the array in the form that got returned? I'm not entirely sure what the best option would be. So this is something that you probably have to discuss with your users. But just keep in mind that arrays are going to affect how the knowledge view works, and you need to be able to keep that in mind. Favorites. Processes in error and old processes knowledge view. We're going to go over this real quick. It's almost unnecessary now. We do have, although I don't know if I have them on this system, we do have a download called Custom Utilities. I do have them on this system. So the Custom Utilities package, it's on the downloads page on the support site. It is a bunch of knowledge views. There are several different folders, and they're like the form instances count report that you can pull open, which basically runs off of business values. But there are also several knowledge views in here that are useful, one of which is processes in error. So you can, in fact, just download the custom utilities and install them, and you have processes in error. There are also some useful stuff like importing users from a CSV file, running a permissions report. There's a separate processes in error thing here that's a little more complicated. So this exists, and you can download it. It's the custom utilities package. It's on the downloads page of the support site. But I always create my own. And there are two I think that are useful. One is the process in errors. Now, the process in errors is super simple to set up and configure because for the most part, you don't do much configuration. You don't change anything on properties. You don't change anything on the configure tab. And on the options tab, the only thing you would change, and this is the unusual bit, is you just return timeline instances because you are just looking for processes in error. So create a brand new knowledge view, call it processes in error, go to the options tab, set it to return timeline instances, go to the filter tab, and this is unnecessary for this. I think I've gone in and made some changes to this that I didn't need to make. What I'm actually looking for, oh no. I clicked on the wrong thing. I'm in the wrong knowledge view. I do not want to save this. Oh, please let me get out of here without saving it. I've probably already messed it up though. I hit old processes. No, I didn't mess it up. It didn't save anything. Good, we're fine. So let's go back here to our system here and look at processes in error. So once again, I'm still returning timeline instances, but in this case, my filter is processes in error equals yes. So you're looking for process and process in error. So you just pick that and set it to equal yes. And this will return all of the processes that are in error on your system. There are no processes in error on my system. That it makes me happy. That is what I generally want to see. So we're good with that. So really simple to set up and create. Similarly, old processes. We're doing the same thing that we did with processes in error, except here, what we're looking for is stuff that is sticking around longer than it should. So I have two filters that I need to apply to this. First of all, I need to know stuff that's still active. If a timeline is completed, it's completed. Why do I care? It did the thing it was supposed to do. What I'm more interested in this use case here, is I want to find everything that's still running and that has been running for more than 90 days. So I am looking for a timeline start date that is less than 90 days ago. I mentioned earlier that this is a little tricky. I should probably explain what I meant by that. Normally, what you would think you want, if you're thinking logically, is I want a timeline start date that is greater than 90 days ago. But that is not what I chose. What I have chosen here is less than 90 days ago. This 90 days ago is really misleading, and I don't know how to make it any clearer without really messing up what greater than and less than means. The 90 days ago makes you think that what Process Director says is, okay, I want a timeline start date that is less, well, what you think you want is I want a timeline start date that is greater than 90 days ago. In other words, if the timeline started more than 90 days ago, that's what I want to return. But that's not what 90 days ago means. 90 days ago, or 30 days ago, whatever it may be, actually returns a date value, the actual date of whatever 90 days ago was. I don't know what that would be. It would be, if I go back and look at my Windows calendar, I guess, 90 days ago. Why isn't it showing me my Windows calendar? I hate Windows 11. I despise it. So May, April, March. So sometime before March 28th. Not exactly, but sometime-ish. So March 27th. Let's say that this would return the date, March 27th. Well, what I actually want is a date that is less than March 27th, 2026. So you have to read this days ago 90 as the value of whatever the date was 90 days ago. And I am looking for a start date that is less than what the date was 90 days ago. So this is really misleading because what it makes you think is, oh, the system is just going to count back 90 days and will only return something that started more than 90 days ago. And that's not what it's doing. It doesn't care about days. It's not going to count back to say, okay, this start date, is this start date greater or less than 90 days ago? That's not what it does. 90 days ago is going to return a hard and fast date. March 27th, or maybe it's February, right? Because 90 days would be 3 months. So May, April, March. So February 27th. So it is going to pull, this value is going to pull February 27th or something similar to that as a date. Now I have two date values that I'm going to compare. The timeline start date and February 27th, 2026. Now my comparison is different. I'm looking for a start date prior to or less than February 20th or 28th, 2026. So that's why this is misleading, because we're not counting days ago. We're returning a date that is in number of days ago, and we're doing a date comparison. And I want date A to be less than date B. So this tricks people a lot. It throws people off because what they think is, oh, well, we're just counting back days. And so I'm just going to return my timeline start date, and then I'm going to count days. How many days ago did that timeline start? That is not what we are going to do. We are strictly doing a date comparison. So greater than and less than means something different than what you think. I don't know how to make that clearer because of the way that Days Ago works. It's just one of those little quirks that you have to get used to. But in this case, having gotten past that and configured it correctly, I'm looking for something that is still active and that started prior to February 27th or whatever, 2026. So what I'm looking for in this case are processes that should not still be alive. Something should have happened to end this process because it started over 3 months ago and it is still active. As a system administrator, I'm going to be curious as to why that is. And the reason why that is because, well, I never went back and ended this from the timeline on February 20th. So this is the business rules time or training webinar, and I had these two things running, and now they are still running 90 days later, thus making my old processes knowledge view work. And I would then have to go in and, as an administrator, either ask why this thing hasn't been closed out, why it is taking so long to finish. But those are my two primary administrative, knowledge views that I would want to run. All right, sysvars as columns. So I have a form, the sysvar form. Might as well run it. And there we go, search for user, and I can pick a user there. That would be me, of course, or Barb or Diana. And here is my knowledge view. Well, let's open it and then we'll run it. And we can see what we're returning. All right, so I've got Barb Stanley as my user. Her manager is Eric Wintemute. The department is support. Her email is barb@bplogix.com. Her manager is eric@bplogix.com. None of these email addresses exist, so don't even try. That's primarily for the YouTube audience. These are fake email addresses. So, you know what? Mail them to your heart's content. Okay, well, they're not all fake email addresses. Maybe this is a little dangerous, but it's too late. Maybe I'll have to block this out on the saved version of the webinar. In any event, we saw our form earlier, right? That form didn't seem to be all of that complex. It only has one form field, and that's a user form field. What is going on here? Well, what is going on is our use of system variables. If we go to the columns tab here, I only have one form field, and that is the user form field that exists on the form. Everything else that is being displayed in this knowledge view is all fake. I mean, it's not all fake. They don't exist on the form. They're all system variables that are derived from this single field on the form. They don't actually exist anywhere on the form. I'm pulling this data from the system as system variables, and this is all using formatters, right? So for the user system variable, assuming that I have a manager set up in my user account, I can pull the manager back with the modifier show manager equals 1. So this is how I know who the user's manager is. If I have the department set up in their user account, I can pull that. Obviously, everybody should have their email set up properly, And if I want the manager's email, I can even do that. I can set the email formatter and then just add in show manager equals 1, and it's going to return the manager's email. Basically, I can pull any accessible system variable that I want into the knowledge view because all of the column fields are system variables. So I can use, well, I was about to say I can use any system variable I want. That's not true. You can only use a system variable that has meaning in the context of the form instance that you're returning. All of these system variables have meaning because I have a user field. And that user field is a user picker, which will return the user object for whoever was chosen in that form field. Thus, because I have the context of that user object, I can then use the user form field system variable, which again will return the user object, and I can pull their manager and their department and stuff. In fact, I can pull for a user, if we were just to go look at user administration, we'll pop open Barb's user account here, and all of these additional properties, assuming that they're set, are part of the user object. So if I can do it for current user because all user system variables return an object. So if I have a user picker on a form, the form field system variable for that user picker automatically returns a user object, which means that all of this information down here is accessible to me. Actually, all of this information up here is accessible to me, although we don't have modifiers for a lot of this for good reason. But certainly all of this stuff we can grab. Now, obviously, if you don't have any of these additional properties set for your users, then there is nothing to return, and those would not be valuable to you. But keep in mind that as long as I can, the system variable that I want to use, as long as it has some context that Process Director can identify, I can use it as a column in a knowledge view. I do see a lot of people who don't seem to realize that. They kind of think that, okay, well, I can go to the Choose System Variable dialog box, and as long as it exists in here, I can use it. And if it doesn't exist in here, I guess I can't use it. Well, that's not true. The Choose System Variable dialog box is there for convenience, but it does not define the limit of what you can have as a knowledge view column. So just keep in mind that any knowledge view that you create, any column in that knowledge view, you can use a system variable. Now, if that system variable does not have an identifiable context that Process Director can identify, then it won't return anything. All right, so for example, if I'm pulling a form system variable, and let's say, what would email user, while it usually doesn't have a context outside of an email template, might actually be identifiable in a knowledge view. What wouldn't be identifiable? If you're in a process timeline, that would be identifiable. Okay, workflow. If I'm using process timelines, which you should be, and not workflows, which you shouldn't be, if I used a workflow system variable in this instance, actually, I don't think I have a process timeline either. So this is a case where any process system variable, so process, task, timeline or timeline activity, workflow or workflow step, all those classes of system variables would return nothing. There's no context for them. There is no timeline identified here. There's no timeline associated with the form. The form does not automatically start a process. So therefore, any timeline system variable that I was to try to use in this knowledge view would just be invalid. Nothing bad would happen. That just wouldn't return any values. It would just be blank. So to use a system variable, it has to have meaning in the context in which process director is evaluating it. As long as it does, you can use it as a column. Finally, the export deal. So let's run this knowledge. Well, I actually probably should have looked at it, but let's run this knowledge view. Okay, remember I was talking about earlier how I have 1,000 of these data forms. Well, I do have 1,000 of them. And unfortunately, it's only going to show me 100 of these items. So it's only going to show me 1/10 of the ones that I have. So I can do a search for less. There we go. We've got 4 companies that are called Grant. Fine. I'm happy with that. I want to export this. So I'm just going to click here to export the results to Excel. And there we go. It wants to download to my system. I guess I'll save. And now that I've saved, I can open the file, open it in Excel, and in the fullness of time, Excel will open and it will show me that this is a file that I have downloaded from the internet. So it may be very, very dangerous, although I can enable it for editing. And now I've got all of this. Do I have 2 companies called Grant and Sons? Apparently I do. I'm going to complain to the creator of my mock data that I have 2 Grant and Sons in 2 different industries. However, I've got this Excel file. All right, let's look how I got there. Now, for the most part, if I was going to export to CSV, it wouldn't matter all of that much. In fact, let me copy this knowledge view and we'll change her up a little bit. So we'll copy here, and we'll open up our copy here and we'll do something a little bit different. I'm going to go to, no, I want to go to configure, and I just want to get rid of that, and we'll show the export to CSV icon automatically. Okay. Now we can run it. So under normal circumstances, I can always export a knowledge view to CSV. Don't have to do anything special. I've just got to click on the thing in the options tab that says show the export to CSV icon. I can click on it and it will save my CSV file, which I can open up, and it will just be a standard, CSV file that I can view in Excel, because Excel is the default reader in Windows for CSV files. Okay, great. That's good enough. But of course, it has no formatting or anything else, and it's not really even an Excel file. It's not really an Excel file until I go File, Save As, and then I can change this from a CSV file to an Excel spreadsheet. So I would have to change this to an Excel workbook and save it. Now it's actually an Excel file. That means that now I can do any formatting that I want, so like to the text or whatever else it might be. I can do all of those changes. So I can, put a background on my header, and I can put in borders and shading and all of the other stuff that you would normally apply to an Excel table. I can't do that if it's a CSV file. The thing about a CSV file is, and let me open up Visual Studio Code here. And let's close this and let's open downloads. Downloads, where are they? Downloads. There we go. CSV. This is what the actual CSV file looks like. It is just a comma separated list of values. So I can't do any formatting to it or anything else until I take the CSV file and save it to Excel. However, I can actually pull that into a CSV file or into an Excel file automatically. A couple of things. The first thing I have to do is go to the Configure tab. And I'm going to have to hit Show Export to Excel icon. And then I'm going to need to update my knowledge view. And the reason that I need to do that is because once I say, I want to export this thing to Excel, I have to go back to the Properties tab, and I have to select an Excel template. The nice thing about an Excel template, and let's go grab our Excel template and download a copy of it and look at it. Nice thing about an Excel template is that I can define how I want my data exported, but I have to define it in an Excel template that is stored in the content list and that I can point to as a template for the Excel export. I don't need to do any of that with a CSV export. It's automatically going to export it to CSV. I could then open it in Excel. It will open in Excel by default because that's how Windows sets it up. And then I can do whatever formatting and stuff I want. If I want to export it in Excel directly, I'm going to have a template. Now, in this case, I've done a couple of things here. First of all, I've added in the cool little advanced sort and filter so that whenever my product gets created, the file gets created, it will have all of these filters already in it. That's going to be cool. And I have to define where the data from my knowledge view is going to go. The way that I do that is with this syntax here. The important bit is ampersand equals BP dot. That tells Process Director that, or not Process Director, but Excel, although it also tells Process Director, that this is a BP Logix deal. It's a variable that I am passing it, and we're going to fill that variable with the value. The variable that I'm going to pass it is the name of my column. So name, company name, industry, and exchange. Those just happen to be the columns that exist in my knowledge view. So name, company name, industry, and exchange. So I can do whatever formatting I want. I even put in the table border here. I created what did I use? It's the format as table. And I picked this black and white table format for it. And it's just going to create this automatically. And so what is going to happen is it's going to create a new row, starting with row 2 in my Excel spreadsheet for every row that exists in the knowledge view. And it's just going to fill it out from top to bottom. However many rows that exist are going to be there. So as long as I have this template and I have this template saved in my content list, where it is right there, book1.xlsx. I'm not doing anything else with it. There's no data associated with it. not importing it into the database or doing anything like that. All I'm doing is wanting to provide a template for the export of my data. So once I have gone in, and you have to do it in this order, and I've clicked the Show Export to Excel icon, I immediately have to update my knowledge view. Because once I update my knowledge view, the property right here, Select Excel Template, will be visible. It will not be visible because it is not a standard property, and it does not exist until you have specified that you are going to show the Export to Excel icon, or you choose Exported to Excel for the knowledge view results. Now, if you choose Exported to Excel, the knowledge view will not open up directly. When you call the knowledge view, it'll automatically create it and want to export it automatically. That's generally not a great idea. There are a couple of administrative things where that might work fine for, but for the most part, if you want to export to Excel, especially for end user knowledge views, you kind of want to force the end users to do it manually. Also, because it happens automatically when you choose Exported to Excel and the knowledge view never displays, it is both confusing and frightening because, I click on a button or pick a menu item and all of a sudden it says, hey, I'm about to download something to you. That would frighten or confuse me. If I'm going to download something, I at least want to choose to download it rather than have a download just automatically forced on me. But that option is available to you. You can force the download. And like for some things, for an administrative purpose, right? If I just want to go into my content list, click on a knowledge view and say, run the knowledge view from the content list directly, and then just grab the document, that's fine. But again, I'm clicking run in the content list after selecting the knowledge view. So again, I am manually downloading it. Although it is possible to run some knowledge views, and we have customers who do that, who have a couple of knowledge views that they do run on an automated basis from a goal, and they just export it to some local file system, and they can go in and look at it at their leisure. So there are reasons to do it. Generally not for stuff that you're showing to end users, but there are reasons to do it. But whether you pick Exported to Excel or click the Show Export Excel icon, it doesn't matter. You still have to hit the update, because only after the knowledge view has been updated will this Select Excel Template property appear. This is mandatory. I cannot export to Excel without a template. It's not a nice idea. It's the law. So you have to have this template. And once you have it inside your content list, as we do right here, then I can run right over here to this property. I can pick my book1.xlsx, and it will serve as the Excel template for the data that I export, as we saw earlier. There are a couple of other properties on the Configure tab. So the file save as name when downloading, I can specify that. So it's Excel-current date time. So we'll update and run, and it'll show me my stuff, and we'll hit download. And what do you want to do with Excel-5_28_2026 10:43 a.m. So it gives me my current date time name in a valid file format. So it prenames it for me. Of course, I can always go save as, and if I want to save it with a different name, I certainly can. I don't have to accept the default name, but if I hit save, it will just save it again with the default name, which, it's up to you whether you want to save it with the default name or save as, but that's how it does my Excel export and gets my data to me and creates it in a nice Excel file that is already formatted, because I've formatted it with the Excel template that exists in my content list. All right, there's a couple of more things that I could talk about, but as I suspected, we are starting to run out of time. So rather than starting some sort of partial topic or dealing with it with less detail than it deserves, I think we'll just go ahead and stop here. I hope you have a great week, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next week. Until then, so long.